Hello, good morning. I'm a little early today, because I woke up running to talk about this. So a lot of people go through the experience of discovering they're an empath, meaning that they feel their way through life and they feel other people. So when you are, there's hundreds of symptoms of being an empath, and like really fantastic literature on this, that you can Google and read on. But one of the main factors, signs, I suppose, hey Kristen, is basically that when you're around other people, you pick up on all their junk. Like, that's really the end of the story, right? Like, you pick everybody else's junk up. And the problem is when you don't have a vocabulary for what's happening, you don't know, hey Sean, you don't know the difference between what's real for you and what you're just picking up from somebody else. Hey Maggie, ooh, long time no see, girl. And ask questions like, I'm on the computer, so I hopefully can see comments if you have them, unlike on the phone. So do I think that labels are particularly helpful? Not in the meta sense, but in a micro sense, they're really helpful for us to learn about what's the next step in our lives, what's the next place to look to get guidance about how to feel better and about how to learn about ourselves and how we relate to the world, so that we can, continually move ourselves towards being and feeling how we want to. And that's not because we need to be perfect or perfectly evolved, but because most of us know we could feel a lot better. And if you're listening to me, you probably want to feel a lot better. So we might as well, right? So having a label, something like empath, can be really helpful for certain people at certain times. I know for me to understand, oh wait, there's a totally different type of human out there that feels their way through the world. Like, oh, okay, I'm not abnormal. I'm not crazy. I just feel everything that other people don't. So you're not too sensitive. You're not too whatever you've heard, right? You just are different. You're different, and you're not different from other people because you're in the same group with people like me, right? So you're not like abnormal. You just need to be in a different group. So the thing is, a lot of us, when we get this definition of empath, we can use it and then sort of get stuck. And what I see happening is people discover that they're an empath. They discover that they feel their way through the world, and they hold on to that like it's the ship they're going down on. And let me explain what I mean. So when you discover that you feel everything, and that means that, maybe you regulate how much you're in big crowds. Maybe you need a lot of extra rest in order to process all that emotion that's moving through you, particularly if you haven't, if you don't yet have the skill set to differentiate between what's you and what's somebody else. So you might need a lot of rest to come back to normal. Those types of things. And so we go through that process, but then we get stuck in this, well, it's me versus everyone else, because the world is overwhelming and I can't filter it out because I feel everything because I'm an empath, capital E. And so we get in this like victim space. It's very subtle, but it's a victim space, right? And the other thing that happens with empaths is, if we don't know it and we don't know how to work with it, we can tend to surround ourselves with really controlling jerk people. Insert swear word there, right? Like, not so nice people. And so if you Google empath, you may discover a lot of articles about empaths and narcissists, or empaths and people who are abusive, or gaslighting, ghostlighting, this is embarrassing moments live on film. Gaslighting, I did it. Gaslighting. So thank you. Gaslighting. So, and that then is a learning process. So all of a sudden we go, oh my gosh, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. But if we stay in that's what's happening, then we get stuck in a victim-based mode where this new discovery about ourselves is used to defend how we are and blame other people for not really understanding us, instead of giving us the tools to move forward in a way that feels good. So I encourage you, if this is all new to you, I encourage you to look up what being an empath is and see if it's right for you, or any label that you've chosen, right? Or you think is a really great fit and has helped you. But don't stop there. Don't stop there. Because the point of these types of labels is to give us the intellectual framework to then learn how to care for ourselves even better. So as an empath, the way to care for yourself isn't by blaming everybody for being a big jerk, right? Like, that's not going to help you feel better. That's just going to make you feel special. And feeling better and feeling special aren't always the same thing, because we can feel really special sobbing in our bed because we're so sensitive and we process all the pain of the world. That's basically my grad school experience, right? Like, I was in ethnic conflict and civil war, and I'd sit there in my apartment sobbing for the ills of the world and all the violence and all of the pain and suffering. And I was like, what? I can't possibly work in this field. And I remember a really great mentor at the time who said, you're exactly the right person, but you have to move forward. And that's what we're saying here, right? So you're sensitive, you process a lot, great, but you have to learn how to manage that so that you can feel good. You know, just having it happen makes you powerless. It's like, oh, I'm powerless to my own skills. I'm powerless to my own gifts. I'm powerless to the way that I am. I can't help being an empath, right? That's a little subtle victimhood. And I really want to make that clear, because so many people get stuck there. So many people get stuck there. I can't change the way I am. That's just who I am, you know? But that's putting you at like the mercy of what could be a gift. And that victimhood is what we've got to clear up. So what would be the next steps, right? Then we have to discover, okay, well, if I'm just different, I just function differently than perhaps the people in my relationships, the people I work with, then what do I need to do in order to get the strength of being an empath, but without the victimish punishment side? And by punishment, I mean like the overwhelming emotion that makes it impossible to move forward on a daily basis. Because if you're an empath, you felt that, right? Like, I need to lay in bed and just cry because the world is too much. Like, that feeling. So what do we need to do to create boundaries? We have to learn about ourselves and what it means to fill ourselves up. Because many, many empaths, we don't know what our opinion is about very basic things, because all of the voices, right? We're so in tune to what's right for everybody else, we don't know what's right for us. And we've probably started it since we were born. So it's not like, oh, it's just something I slipped into here. No, it's something that's always been there. So we may not have actually developed the skill of having opinions or having boundaries. And nobody's fault, let's leave the past behind, but now we have to do it. Now, if you want to move through the world and feel good and use your empathetic skills, we've got to create some boundaries, and we have to have a sense of self. Now, our sense of self can be, well, I'm the over-feeling sensitive one, sure, but you still have to know where you begin and other people end, right? So let's think, okay, what does that mean? If we're going to start to have a sense of self, then what does that mean? Well, that means I've got to know what my thoughts are, what my feelings are, which means I have to be able to recognize what's somebody else versus what's me. And then once I can recognize that, have the strength of conviction that I'm going to choose or be able to speak about what's mine. So it's a multi-step process, right? And the first step really is discovering that all that stuff coming in might not be you. And this is something that my coaches have worked on endlessly with me, because I didn't realize that some of my thoughts weren't actually mine. And when you're an empath, that doesn't mean that, hey, Mary, it doesn't mean that you have to, it doesn't mean the voice has to be another person, right? Empaths really connect with all sorts of things. So we may connect with social expectation. We may connect with cultural themes and paths that culture winds through. So we may interpret these rules or ways of being, even if nobody's ever said them or even believed them in our lives, because we're just picking up on general things, right? Cultural trends, social mores, things like that. And it could be assumed voices. So because we're seeing the things, or we're feeling the things that are between the words and between what's said and done, we can pick up on how somebody responds to you if you behave a certain way or think a certain way. And so we interpret that information as a clear, like, yes or no, yeah, that's okay, that's not okay, and and nothing was ever said, right? So all of this is very complex, but the first step is to have somebody be able to call you out. So you can call yourself out on a lot of things, because we know if we go into a tense, stress state, that's not natural to you. That's not inherent to you. So if a thought stresses you out, it's probably not a thought that's yours. It's probably a thought coming from outside. that may be all we know, right? Like, so, okay, first step is to identify and see it. It may also be really helpful to write down all of your thoughts. Like, write down a list of 20, 40, 50 thoughts. Like, what's going through my head? What do I think I need to do? And then look, like, is this really coming from me? When I look at this thought on paper, does that make me feel good? Or does it make me feel tight? Because if it makes you feel tight, it's probably an expectation you're hitting up again and just not realizing it's not inherent to you. So it's really subtle work, but that's, we got to feel our way through it. That's what empaths do. You got to feel your way through it. And then once we can differentiate on some level, even if it's just a tiny little sliver, between what's mine and somebody else's, then we've got to start filling the well. Because what empaths do unrestrained, untrained, is they sit back and they're just like, bring it in. We're like the never-ending bucket of dump into, some of which is good, some of which is bad, but basically we're feeding off other people. So the beauty is you can't feed off of other people when you're full, right? You can't, because there's nowhere for all of that to come in. So once you fill your bucket, then you can't, there's no room for other people's opinions, other people's thoughts, other people's feelings, because you're full up of yourself. So you may have worked with some practices before that spread light out around you. I work with white light a lot. Like if you did my video on white light, we did that, right? Like we push things out. And that's to fill up that bucket and give you a little bit of space and boundary around you. Particularly helpful for empaths. Helpful for everybody who wants to really connect to their highest energy and their best and highest intention for being in the world. But for empaths, this is non-negotiable. You've got to push your boundaries, your edges out a little bit. And then you have to know how to fill yourself up. So one of my absolute favorite questions to ask, and one that was truly transformational for me, and it took a couple years to go through this, was to ask, what would the loving choice be? And I would just ask that question. So if I'm sitting on the couch and I'm like, oh, I really should work, but I want to take a bath, but I should go for a walk, but I really supposed to call this person, oh, but I should do my client notes, right? All that stuff, the should, which your brain can do, because it's processing everybody's opinion, even the ones that you're self-shaming, even though nobody else is in the room. I would ask, what would be the most loving choice? And I'd wait. And I had to wait for like a month or two to even get an answer. And when you get an answer, that doesn't mean you have to follow it. So I want to take the fear out of this. It doesn't mean you have to do what you hear. Like, you have free will. You don't have to do what your intention says. But having the dialogue where you can ask yourself something and get an answer that's true to you is the powerful part, right? Because that's where we start to feel the sense of self. And once we know the sense of self, once we have that, hey, Natalie, once we have the sense of self, once we have an identity of who we are and what we want, then we can make choices about if we're going to follow through on that. But not to freak yourself out. Like, intuition and knowing what you want doesn't mean you have to follow it. So like that fear of, well, if I know my true self, I'm going to leave everybody in my life and totally, be a jerk and totally selfish and people aren't going to like me. Like, no, scratch that. What we're doing now is building the connection between self and self, so that you can ask what is the most loving choice. You can insert joyful instead. What would be the joyful choice in this moment? And then get an answer. That's what we're building, is just that communication pathway. Then you get to decide whether or not you follow it, right? That's the next step. That's actually the creation of boundaries and the daily action of filling yourself. But the first step is to actually figure out who you are. And that's where we ask, what would be the loving choice? What would be the joyful choice? Just for the sheer sake of asking and leaving space for an answer. So there's a lot of places here. Thanks for the hearts. If you have any questions, type them in. There are lots of other things related to being an empath, right? Like, so many other things. I have a whole course on this. It's only like $24, so it's super easy if you want to, it's super affordable if you want to join it. It's, where is that? It's under Becoming University, and it's called Stay Strong, Tools to Help Navigate Negative People. And basically what's in that is the practices that I really love to help cut energy and expand yourself out. Because we have things like cord cutting, zipping up, creating your own safety bubble around you, affirmations, what to do in the actual interaction with somebody who literally does trigger you and you can't tell the difference between you and them, like tools to use in that exact moment to stay centered in yourself and to learn what yourself even is in relationship to that person. So those practices are in that program. It's called Stay Strong, Tools to Help Navigate Negative People. Check it out if you're interested. But key themes here are, if you're an empath, we've got to do a couple things. One, discover that you exist. Discover that you exist beyond the voices in your head and everybody else's opinion. And we named a couple practices for that. You can write down all your thoughts and then identify them with specific people and realize, like, tune into your feelings. Does it feel constricting? Because if it does, it's probably not inherent to you. If it feels like, okay, that's not bad, then it probably is inherent to you. The key is you want to be really careful about thoughts that are pressure-based thoughts, like, do I believe that I could be working harder? Yes. Is that the best feeling? No, but in my stomach, I know that it's true to me. Like, I know I want to give more. So I don't feel super constricted and tight around it. I feel like, oh, that's a bummer. I really should be doing more. But it's not like I feel sick. It's not somebody else being like, you're never going to succeed if you don't do this. Right? So again, you're an empath, so we got to feel our way through it. It's very, very subtle work. Very subtle work. And then we've got to do a couple other things. So in the program I was talking about, the Navigating Negative People, you do two different things. We do the cutting of cords with other people. So that's the same process as writing those beliefs and realizing who they come from. Meaning, figure out what's you and what's them. And cord cutting of any sort, zipping up, cord cutting, whatever, but basically the severing of the energetic ties that you create in the moment to that other people is one of the most liberating things you can do as an empath. Because when you're energetically connected to somebody in time and space, it doesn't have to be when they're right in front of you. It can just be any time, really. What you're doing is you're taking that vital energy from the solar plexus and draining it in these connections. And so what you could have, which is focused, contained energy that supports your system and your ability to move forward, what we do instead is we create these like hundreds of thousands of little cords, and that's exhausting us. It's like being on a, have you ever seen pictures of places where somebody has a big power pole in their, on their street, and then everybody's like come and connected to it to try to get cable or something? It's kind of like that. Like you're just, oops. Hot tea everywhere. You're just seeping out on the edges and seeping out all that energy. Hold on, let me just wipe up this tea so it doesn't stain the table. So that's what's happening, and we've got to, yes, I can use this. So we've got to learn how to cut those cords so that you actually have the energy within yourself to then create the sense of self and the boundaries. So those practices are a really key piece of this. I'll put one caveat here is that people's biggest fear when they go into those practices is that because you're an empath and you really care and you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, you don't want to necessarily cut those relationships. You're like, oh my gosh, if I cut that cord, does that mean that person's out of my life forever? No. It just means in this one instant and moment, you are giving yourself the relief of overthinking and overfeeling that relationship, so that you can interact with them in a way that you showing up with another person. Like, it's so freeing, I can't even begin to explain. I don't think I would I'll just say this flat out, I do not believe I would have relationships with people in my life were it not for these practices. Because I was incapable of interacting with them as they were, because I was so tied up in what they were meant about me and how I felt about how they said, like, I couldn't even see what they were saying or doing or being, because I was transcribing, that's not the right word, translating it all through my own emotional lens and feeling everything instead of being present with it and being full of myself. So again, my bucket was empty and I was like drawing their energy, right? So cord cutting, whatever that is, cord cutting, zipping up, all of those energetic cutting practices are incredibly powerful to start to free you to learn what's you and what's other people. Combine that with things like the journaling practice where you're writing out the beliefs and seeing who they're attached to. Very, very powerful. So now we know, okay, that's them, this is me, at least on a felt level. We might not have the ability to create the thoughts that are inherent to ourselves yet, and that's where we get into the practice, like what would be the most loving choice? What would be the most joyful choice? And you can ask this at every moment, right? The other day, my partner says, well, I said to him, where do you want to eat dinner? dining table, you know, living room, or outside? Well, you choose. What? What do you mean I choose? Right? Because I'm so energetically connected to him. His joy matters more than my own opinion. And like, I couldn't even tell you what my opinion was. I was paralyzed by literally a choice between where we're, you know, two options where we're going to have dinner. Like, that's what we're talking about here. So we ask in those moments, what's the most loving choice? What's the most joyful choice? Because you have an opinion. It's just buried under years of putting other people's opinions before yours without realizing it. Right? So we just practice this all the time. What would be the most loving choice? What would be the most loving choice? What would be the most joyful choice? When you're deciding for breakfast, when you're deciding what clothes to wear, when you're deciding how many times you're going to hit the lock button on your car, when you leave it, you know, like all the time. Because what we're doing there is building up the communication between your intuition and you. Building up that inner communication of, I have a feeling, I have a say in this, I have an opinion, and here it is. So we're cutting those energetic connections. We're creating a sense of self and an identification of a sense of self. Like, I know how to tune into what is me and what's real for me. And then we push out. And by pushing out, we're not pushing people away. We're just ensuring that we are full of ourselves. Right? So a lot of people, like, this is why I want you to keep going with the concept of an empath, because if you just get into the concept and stop there, then we're in a really defensive position of me versus them. Well, I'm just too sensitive and nobody understands me. Well, I can't work in the world because the world's just too heavy for me. Like, we don't want to stop there. That's very victim-based. And it's victim-based using your own gifts against you, right? Like, you are saying that the way that you are makes life too hard for you. Like, whoa, right? Let's cut that out. So we're not creating this bubble out of defense because, like, oh my gosh, I have to put light around me because everybody's evil and trying to come in at me. Like, nobody's trying anything. Like, stop with the paranoia. I'm saying this mostly to people who aren't listening to this because I see this a lot in energy circles. Like, stop with the paranoia. Stop with the everybody's trying to attack me and there's evil spirits in the world. Like, oh my God, I get it. And there are things that I know nothing about and I can't see. And there are people fighting light battles that I don't understand. And thank you for doing that for the rest of us, right? Like, more power to you. Thank you for taking on that mantle because I'm not, clearly. But I want us to move out of being victims and being victimized by our own gifts and move into empowered action. So we're creating this light bubble not as a defense, but as a way of feeling really fully expanded of ourselves. And when we do that, we're giving ourselves a little bit of a leg up against our old habits and patterns, which are to be a holy bucket and like take from everybody else, right? So we're just filling the bucket. We're giving ourselves the best shot at making it through the day and feeling really good about ourselves. So I know that was a lot. Hopefully you had a piece of paper. If you are interested in the cord cutting and the zipping up and all of those practices, that I have a meditation on creating the bubble. You can find that at becominguniversity.com, and it's called the Stay Strong Practice Tools for Navigating Negative People. But you have a lot here as well to go on, so lots of options here. Feel free to private message me as well if you have some stories that you want to share, or share them here because we're all in the same boat, right? We're all in the same boat. So hope that was helpful. I'd love to hear from you, and I will talk to you soon. Mwah.